Alright guys, TacticalRab back again today. Hope you're all doing well and enjoying your day so far. Welcome to episode 57 of the Breaking Point podcast. We are back in business, no EasyMac today, recovering from FaZe's loss seemingly. But again, we'll dive into that today. We're live on Twitch right now. We're after the fact on YouTube, all the other podcast platforms. I appreciate all the great support the last few episodes as well. It's been absolutely fantastic through the start of this year. Looking to continue that trend. If you're not joining us live on Twitch on a Tuesday, feel free to do that in the future. So, Lion, how's it going? Exciting time, honestly. This is probably the most hectic month of COD we are going to have all year because we had the major on the 3rd to the 6th of March. Since then, we've gone week 1. That's just happened. We're going to review that today. We've got week 2 of stage 2 qualifiers, week 3, then the major at the end of the month. It's absolutely out of control.
Yeah, mate. This is it's been a great couple weeks of COD. Ever since the major, just the vibes are high. The competition's getting even stronger. And the fact that teams like FaZe can come out of being looking almost indestructible in stage 1, and then the competition catches up and it's all even playing field again, apart from, I guess, OpTic, who are still on that hot streak. So, man, it's just been good. I think there should have been maybe another week break between the stage and the major, but it's okay. We don't stop.
We don't stop. There will be from now on. I think stage 1 was a bit of an anomaly when the break was before the major. After major 2, there's a pretty big break. We have basically a month, I think, after major 2 until the Pro-Am Classic, which I'm sure we're going to talk plenty about. But I'm sure during that period, it's going to be crazy because like roster moves will probably be in abundance because if teams don't win over the next couple of weeks and get good, they're not going to win by champs. So it is also massively important right now because if you look at like already London have more points this season than they got the entirety of last year in terms of the standings, which I mean, they didn't make champs last year, but it goes to show that they've pretty much already said, them, FaZe and OpTic, top 3, they've basically already said like, look, we're going to be at champs. Like they're pretty much not locked, obviously, but within reason, they're showing like, you know, they're already pretty much saying
not fall off a cliff and they're at champs.
That's it. Exactly. It's like if you're New York or Paris, you have 10 points. OpTic have 105. Like, you know, it's time to do something, isn't it, lads? So let's crack on with the games. New York will just dive right in, to be honest. I mean, they played the first game of the week. They played a game a little bit later on. Yeah, Pepe Saj in the chat or whatever the emojis people use nowadays because it wasn't a great one. Also, Coachy, just to address that real quick, not every team gets to champs. They were planning to do it. So I think I actually got a comment like this on my video today. In Modern Warfare, they made it 12-team at champs because it went to online in the year and they thought, okay, let's just give them one a chance. Last year it was 8 teams. This year, the plan was to have only 8 teams at the majors that everyone was like, what are you playing at? So they changed that back to 12 teams at the majors, but still only 8 teams qualify for champs. So that's at least how it is currently. But yes, New York, they lose 3-1 to London. To credit to New York in a way, yes, London had a sub, even though they did look great on the very next day against Thieves that we'll discuss here. But New York put up a fight, at least, after they went down 2-0. Like, they did win a control. I was like, they seem to have some spirit. But of course, we've got to talk about the fact that Neptune comes back, Royalty goes out. It's almost like an apology to Neptune, be like, yeah, sorry, we dropped you. It wasn't really your fault. But literally nothing changed. It's quite remarkable how you could just predict what the scoreboard's going to look like before the series. You can put, okay, Hydra's going to have between a 0.95 and a 1.1 with the most damage. Crim's going to have like the second most engagements with like a 0.9. Then you're going to have Clay at a 0.7, Neptune at a 0.7, least damage. And you can just predict it before the series even begins. It happens again, basically every series they play. It just shows like something's wrong. I mean, the way that they chelled Florida was just embarrassing. I mean, Neptune decided to pull out the second AR, Crim on the sub. Like if you're putting Crim on the sub in this game, it's just chalk, lads. Like, let's just not even bother with it. You just know it's over at that point. Why even try?
Yeah.
But, you know, fair enough. Is this the most disappointing team in CDL history, Line?
Oh, I think considering what we thought they were going to be, I actually don't think so, because going into the season, I didn't feel like this was going to be a top team. I thought maybe top 6. That was my general feeling. But the fact that they've come out here, they're still winless in Hardpoint. So they're 0-13 now. They've almost reached Courage 0-15
Oh wow,
status.
yeah, that's a good point. 2 away,
So
baby. It's good.
the t-shirts will go off the charts if that's the case. But if we look at the stats for this, the qualifiers for this week, yeah, Neptune came back in, but he still had a 0.69 this week. And you would expect him to come in and play with a little bit more fire, but I just assume that playing in this system with these guys, it's just impossible. Like we heard in the comms that there was very little to any motivation to try and bring back these hard points. It just sounded super dull. And just, I don't know. What do we do at this point? Do you think that you blow up this roster, pretend it never happened, and then maybe bring in PaulEhx, drop him in there? He's quite topical at the moment.
Yes.
But who do you take out? And if it was your decision, because obviously you make all the decisions in the CDL, TacticalRab, who would you put in there?
People actually say that sometimes, that I'm like rigging all the storylines for views, which I wish could be true. I wish I just, had
that's just the COD League, though. You get fed
stuff.
them.
Yeah, true. They the Daniel Sai asked me before the weekend, like, right, who do you want to win? Like, okay, we'll put him with PC number 7, easy stuff. Okay, what would I do? You have to make a 2-person change. One man is not going to cut it. You can see that a 1-person change doesn't do much, because we saw what happened with London, right? They swap out Gizmo for PaulEhx. The team looks basically the same, with Paul dropping similar numbers. Like, they fit him into their system so quickly that 3+1 is very different to a 2-man change. I think once you make a 2-person change, it changes up the entire culture and dynamic of the team. And the problem is that if you do make a 1-man change, you're probably going to have to get rid of Neptune, because he hasn't really performed, doesn't seem comfortable in what they're trying to make him do. And of course, you can blame the players on that. You can blame like Crim and Clay on that to some degree, because Neptune even tweeted after their first series, he was like, I just want to play my game. Feels like he's been shoveled into this role of like hill bitch, basically. There's probably a reason why he has the lowest damage as an SMG, which really shouldn't be the case. So yeah, whatever the situation is for Neptune, it's not like he's performed especially well. Neither did Royalty in that role, in fairness, so it does make you wonder about the whole thing they've got going on there in the team. But still, if you are going to make a 1-man change, you probably think, okay, let's get rid of Neptune. Maybe they're thinking, we're going to put Crim on the full-time sub with Hydra and bring in PaulEhx as the flex. I actually think they might be thinking that. I hope they're not, because yes, Crim ran a sub in World War II, but it's definitely not the way, like, can you see that team of 4 winning champs? No chance. No. Before I discuss what I would do, I kind of just feel bad looking back at New York, that last year they had Hydra, they had Mac, they had Asim. All 3 players that you could argue are the best players on their respective teams at the moment. So you're thinking, okay, maybe went a little bit wrong there. To me, I think if PaulEhx is available, I think it's actually probably a sensible choice right now. Played very well this week, lots of fire to prove himself. All the pros seem to say like he's got his head screwed on right. Everything about it, his comms, like just his attitude as a teammate is great, which is something that you're probably going to need playing with some of these guys. I would say put Crim on the main AR. I think that that's worth a go. Much more chance to succeed than Crim on a sub. Like Crim was basically doing that last year on the main AR for Dallas Empire, and they were a top 3 team all season, right? They were a solid team without, with talent. Don't get me wrong, but with maybe not as much talent as FaZe, for example. I would give that a go. Most of the best main ARs on this game, if not all of them, have been flexes in the past. You look at Dashi, you look at Zero, you look at Arcetes. They're all players that are very comfortable in a flex-ish role that the auto seems to suit. I think you give that a go. I think you've got to, I don't know. I feel like you've got to put Clayster to the bench for now. He hasn't performed great. My theory is that for now, they'll just do a 1-person thing, and then they'll do the Clayster move after the major. But I don't really think that's going to work. And then you have to bring in another sub, in which case I'd bring in someone from Challengers. And I was saying in the video today, I think that, a guy like Johnny, there was rumors that he was even been targeted before Royalty. Royalty came out of the picture last minute, but there was talk about maybe this Johnny guy. So I don't know. I would give it a go with Crim, PaulEhx, Johnny, and Hydra. And I don't know. I think it would be better. I don't know if it would be great, to be honest. But
yeah. Well, there's a lot of new talent coming in through this new Elite season. And it's really just, it depends on if you pick the right guy. Because last year, a lot of the time, teams would have a struggling stage, find a new player, within challenges and then succeed the next stage. And so they just have to hope that they pick someone who's perfect for their lineup. And well, if that happens, then they might be in contention. But right now, they're not looking hot, obviously. Shall we
Yeah,
move
it's
on?
I agree. It's kind of frustrating to talk about, to be honest. Yeah, I mean, yeah, Paul and Venom could be a duo to get through. It's like when you talk about Texas Nation and players like that. Yes, they've been killing it in challenges. They're like, Kismet, Brezzy, Havoc in general. But it's always weird picking those guys up because, sorry,
they're known quantities. Like we know what they can do, but obviously in this game it might be different. But it's just like the teams are less likely to take a chance on a known quantity in the league if they haven't won a lot previously. Like, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. That's the thing. Like, even though people are saying that, oh, well, all the guys that could be the next Simple or Beezy have kind of been picked up already. And I think there's a lot of value in having one of those Texas Nation guys on your team. If you're in a situation like New York are, and you are going to have like Crim, PaulEhx as your ARs, you really need like some potential crazy slaying power from one of your SMGs alongside Hydra. That it feels like it's worth a gamble on a guy like Johnny from Challenges. And then if that doesn't work, you can settle for a more like known quantity. You know what I mean?
Yeah, take a risk.
Because you could bring him in on a
can't get
2-week, right? Like you could legit bring Johnny in on a 2-week and just see if it works.
Would he want to do that is the point, because we've seen in the past players turn that down because it can just ruin their stock for other teams that are in a better position. So
It's a fair point, but I think like you've got to have the confidence in yourself if you're a Challengers player that like, all right, I'm going to turn up, I'm going to fry, I'm going to prove myself. PaulEhx did exactly that this week. Like before last week, he was not in discussion for being on these teams, really. He was like a name that was in the discussion a little bit. But after what he did for London, everyone's saying, wow, Paul should be in the league. That's just what it takes, really. Of course, it's easy when you're on a good team, I guess, but still. Let's talk LAG, baby. They went 1-1 this week. They got 3-0'd by Florida, even though there were some close maps in there. And then they really turned it around and just demolished Paris. I mean, look, don't get me wrong. The Paris comms in that series were just absolutely atrocious. I feel bad for Temp, really. He's sitting there trying to rally the troops, and there's just nothing coming back at him. So we'll talk about Paris in a second. But Slasher finally had a great series. He just he turned back the clock a little bit, to be honest. Was just on fire this entire series. Look, we've seen quite a few teams now, Lion, struggle. Well, not maybe quite a few, but it happened to OpTic, for example. They struggle a little bit. They play Paris. They beat them comfortably. They get some momentum. They go on a bit of a run. Kind of serving up a nice little W right there. Can you really read that much into this victory? They're 1-1. They play Thieves next, which is a matchup that they have won every single time. Not these teams, obviously, but Gorillas have beaten Thieves 3-0 since both these teams were in the league. Can they continue that? If they do, they're actually in a great spot. But still, I don't know. I'm still not sold, especially the 3-0 by Florida. The Paris series, it's Paris and weren't impressive, right? So tough to know what to read into this.
I feel like the Florida series is just typical Florida. They can come out and smoke anyone that they're not intimidated by, it seems. They can just come out, play their style, gunny as hell, and then just dominate. But then LAG have that win against Paris. I do think that does say something, because it was a good win. It wasn't just like a 3-2, because remember when OpTic played them, it was kind of a close series at times. This one, they completely blowed them out. And if we look at a seam for this week, hardpoint kills per 10 minutes, he had 29.1, which is 6 higher than the second highest on his team, Slasher at 23.6. Like, right now, a seam is cracked. He is going so fast around the map. And that's exactly what they need. It allows Hugh to play that more methodical role. But to be fair, Hugh is somewhat struggling at only 20 kills per 10 minutes in hardpoint. For him, that's quite surprising. But you look at his hardpoint time, and he's got 100 seconds per 10 minutes or per map.
Oh yeah, interesting.
So he's dominating the hill time, whereas a seam is running around the map getting kills. And I don't think we really expected that from those two. I would assume that Hugh would be
the other way around
playing, yeah. But it's actually a seam, and so maybe they just realized that he's got that gunny on this game, and he's going around killing everybody. But I do like what I see from this team. And I think since the start of the year, we've always known that they could be a top contender, especially in Respawn. And when they get everything clicking, there's no team that can beat them if they're actually at their best. But we saw the worst and best of them this week, and I think that that's just kind of the trend right now, is that they'll go into a series against a hot Florida, get smoked, and then they'll go against Paris and then smoke them. So it's just, there's a lot of teams right now that are in that sort of midsection of the CDL that can win and lose and not be consistent. And so I don't know what to say about those teams in the middle, because in reality, you could see any side of them at any moment.
Yeah, LAGs are like, I liked this team when it was formed, and I still like it, but it's just weird looking at their series. The way they tend to play out is like, if a seam is going off, they can win. If Slasher goes off as he did, they win pretty comfortably. But you don't really get that many pop-up series from the others. Like Gunners just tends to play consistently pretty well. Like it'll consistently be dropping like a 1.1 plus, which is fantastic. But I haven't seen Hook like take over a series yet, right? Which I think is kind of the question, because Asim's been great. The question remains of what you do with the ARs, just as we were discussing. And then, I don't know, I still want to see more from Hook, to be honest. I want to see that stage 1 Hook from last year. I don't know if he can get back to that form, but he's just been like, I don't know. I feel like we're not talking about Hook as much as we should be. Hook has always been this guy within the COD scene, at least from the pros perspective, that's been considered like the best player to, I don't know, obviously he's won champs now, but pre-champs, he was kind of like the best player to never win it. Everyone in the community said he was overrated, at least the fans wise. And the pros always said, nah, Hook's just disgusting. Since Advanced Warfare, came back in World War II, he just hasn't had the right squad. And he finally put it together on Dallas Empire Modern Warfare, wins it, comes out absolutely frying stage 1 last year on Dallas Empire again. And then all the drama happens with the team. And since then, he just hasn't been the same player. It's just, you expect to see Hook doing what Asim is doing. And if maybe they can't both do that because someone needs to get the hill time, I guess. But I don't know. If both of those are, with Asim playing as well as he is, Hook and Asim should be a tier 1 SMG duo, to be honest.
Yeah.
And it's not quite where it is right now. Any final thoughts on that?
Because I feel like Hugh is playing that entry role, but he's also not playing aggressive. And so do they really have an entry sub right now? I actually know Asim's playing the entry sub role, but he's also got 86 seconds of hill time as well. Like he's jumping in the hill too. Like it's not like Hook's just in the hill and not getting kills. Asim's doing both. So
he's killing it, man.
You know
what are the FaZe stats, just out of interest? Because I think Abizi has a lot of hill time as well, even as like the entry sub.
Just stage 2?
Oh, well, I was thinking just like kind of so far this season, really, for because they've only played 1 match. But I'd be interested to know what FaZe are up to in their hard points.
Yeah, hold on. Let me just pull that
all good. Because I think I saw something that like Abizi actually has an awful lot of hill time in this game.
82.2 seconds per, I think, 10 minutes or whatever.
What's Sim really looking like? Because
Sim 64.4.
And is Arsty's picking up the bulk of it, or how's it going? Or Cell?
It's Abizi. And then
really?
Everyone's quite even. Like if you look at other teams, most teams will have one guy with like 90 and then 3 guys with like 40 or 50 or less. Or like some guys, maybe the other subs got like 30 seconds hill time. But FaZe, it's 80 Abizi, Simp 64, and then R-Cities and Salim on 54. Like they're all jumping in the hill at times, and it's not just one man.
It's interesting because when you look back to World War II, the way that played is you literally just put your AR in the hill and you just sat there, and your SMGs just run around and do the thing. Whereas in this game, it seems like they're playing it rather different, when the SMGs are kind of getting a lot of the hill time and the ARs are holding the angle. So always interesting how that will develop, because
I think it's because a lot of these maps, teams are focusing on breaking a lot more than just rotating. And so often teams will stack the hill in this game. And so the time will be spread across all of them more often than not.
It's a good point, actually, because in World War II, like, it was very fundamental, and a lot of the hard points were on the edges of the map, which meant that you could kind of sit in hill with an AR and hold things down. Whereas if you think of a Bacage or something, like if you're in hill with the AR, you're probably doing it wrong, because you get hit from everywhere. You need to be kind of in the back line. So I don't know. It's an interesting one. Or hiding in the corner. That works as well. Other side of the coin on LAG was Florida. Of course, they lost them this week. Florida did not drop a map this week, which is quite impressive to think about. They went 6-0. Some of them were close. This is just like, Florida just sometimes do this. It's just annoying. But Vivid and Awakening both looked very good. I do wonder, like, was some talk the last few days, the fact that Crimsix and Awakening have kind of had this back and forth, and it's like, could Crim and Awake be a duo on New York? Like, does Crim say, okay, can we pick up Awakening? Can we get him in? Because there has always been this talk with Florida the last couple of years or so that, well, okay, Awakening and Skies, are they going to work in 4v4 as a duo? They've kind of proved that they can kind of so far this year, but again, statistically, they haven't. I mean, they came top 12 at the first major, right? They've won 2 good games here, but looking at their schedule, there's a decent chance they go like 2 and 3, to be honest, because their next games, let me just say real quick, they play OpTic, they play FaZe, and they play Boston. So not the easiest run for Florida by any means to close out the stage from 2 and 0. But yeah, I don't know. There was some talk about that because Florida do like to fit players. They obviously sold Neptune to New York and seemingly got a pretty good deal. However, that worked out because they didn't really get Florida seemed to harness the best of Neptune that we saw last year. Who knows, right? Could Neptune even come back into this team? I just wondered what happens because yes, they've gone 2 and 0 here and looked great, but it's only a matter of time until they end up coming top 8 again at a major. I just can't really see this team of 4 consistently being a competitor. So I feel like they're always going to be that team that's kind of great at finding young talent and bringing it through and then selling it on for profit and finding the next young talent. I don't know. Ogre2 seems to be good at that. Whether he's good at building a team that can win, I'm not so convinced. But maybe he does a good job with the resources he has. Don't know what you think. It's an interesting team.
I honestly don't know what to think about Florida anymore because we've seen every side of this team. They can be the best, and especially since the start of the CDL in Modern Warfare, they can dominate online. They are very good online. Let's put it that way. And then on LAN, they've been interesting. I mean, they got 3-0 smoked first round. Wait, was it 3-0 last major? They lost first round though, right?
Yeah, they lost first round. They were 9th seed. So they played, was it? No,
Can someone put in the
OpTic
chat?
played Paris. Someone's going to remember. Why can I not?
But anyway,
did LAG drop down? No, they didn't.
Looking at this week of matches, Awakening had a 1.39, which is wild. And then Skies had a 1.35. Like, these guys are frying. Awakening with 32.2 kills per 10 minutes in hardpoint. Mad.
They lost to Boston. They lost 3-2 to Boston.
You're right. Yep. And I think that's because Boston is simply more a fundamentally sound team. And so they can just expose Florida for issues in their gameplay. And I don't know. I think that's the only thing that's wrong with them. When they're out slaying teams by so much, they're not going to lose. But when they don't have that massive slaying advantage, they don't have the key fundamentals to be able to actually expose the team they're playing. And I think that's been their issue for a while. But if they can find that out, if they had a coach like Rambo, Mr. Fundamentals, maybe this team becomes a competitor. But for now, it just seems like they rely so heavily on outslaying their opponent. And we actually, on Breaking Point, we posted those graphics of holds, and I think they featured on here. I can't remember if it was in a good or a bad way, but we have some great graphics on Breaking Point at the moment that show you key stats on different hardpoint maps. If I can find where they're on here. Oh no, they're not. They haven't featured in that hardpoint. I guess that makes sense. But overall break percentage, they're the second highest, tied with FaZe on break percentage in hardpoint. So they're not a team.
They play Bacage, baby. They're flooding in.
Yeah, they're flying.
They love a
taking
Bacage.
The hill, winning the trades, and then on hold percentage, they're first.
Wow, there we have it.
Stage 2 so far, but I guess that's because of their 2-3-0 victories.
Yeah, they played one game, and they did play New York, which doesn't count.
Yeah, because they have a 0 break percentage.
Yeah, so break is an interesting stat. Like, yeah, so break percentage, the way EasyMac does it is quite interesting. He explained it in the reply. So New York have a 0% break percentage this entire year. They've not broken a single hardpoint. That doesn't mean that, like, well, exactly. They have broken in. Oh, is that just stage 2? Yeah, it's just one series. I was going to say, yeah, they hadn't broken a single hardpoint. That'd be incredible. The way break percentage works is if you lose the first 15 seconds of the hardpoint time and then you go on to still get the most time out of the two teams on that hill during the remainder of it, then that's considered a break. Okay, so far in stage 2, they haven't done one of those yet, but
Yeah, I think they've done it before though.
they might have done that once or
One would
twice
hope.
before in out of the 13 maps they've played. You would hope on one of the hard points. But okay, yeah, I suppose that's hopeful. Yeah, I kind of agree with you on Florida. I think nice, good take from Davey in the chat. Really, he said they look better when both Atura and Willett were coaching, which I agree. At the end of last year, they looked probably the best they have on a consistency level. I don't really know why they got rid of Atura, to be honest. I don't really know what he's doing nowadays. But they promoted Willett to head coach, but it's just kind of him, and he's very new to it. So
yeah, and they're looking good at times, man. I mean, we've said that for so long. They look good at times. That's why I always pick them in pick'ems, because they're the team that's most likely to cause an upset.
they're basically
That's
a
just
50-50 no matter who they play. So
Yeah,
you know.
bro, they could play OpTic right now and beat them, but they could also
do.
get destroyed.
They do
And I
play
just
OpTic next week. So
exactly.
we shall see.
But I'm not picking them.
This is the best chance Florida have to get out of their group, or not the group, but this is they should make winners now because they have a great map count. They're 6-0, which actually means a lot because even if they go 2-3, like we'll talk about Thieves here in a second, but if they go 2-3, their map count will probably not be as good as Florida's. So they have a good chance to make it through. Seattle next up. Weird week for Seattle. I mean, they played Boston. They got, again, kind of comfortably outplayed on 3 of the maps. And then Prid and Mac went crazy to win the Tuscan control. They clutched like a 2v6 or something. So again, they're looking pretty bad, continuing the trend. To me, Boston, we're not going to really talk about them in detail in this episode because they only played one series, I think. But they were kind of that team that, to me, is the gatekeeper to the real upper tier. To me, you've got 5 teams at the top. Your OpTic, FaZe, London, Toronto, and LA Thieves. I think those are clear top 5 in whatever order you want to put them in. Then you've got Boston. Then you've got the rest. So if you can beat Boston, it shows I think you can contend with the top. But I think my logic might be complete bollocks here because 2 days later they go on to just beat FaZe anyway. Actually, it was the very next day. So maybe I'm just completely faded. But Seattle against FaZe, I don't know. How do they do it? They win at Major 5. They win at the Kickoff Classic. They've done it again. And they probably should have won that control. They kind of choked an 8v3 on the final round of the control that Aches didn't seem to want to mention for some reason. And I mean, yeah, it's good for Seattle because they started out so well. And now they've shown themselves that they have that potential again to still be a top team with this roster, which I think is what it needs because we've seen previous teams, like Gunless, for example, not on this squad, of course, but Gunless's career is littered with occasions where he's started off so well, they've won an event, and then after they've fallen off, the team dynamic just collapses because it's frustrating when you did win or you were one of the best, and then you're all of a sudden not, then it tends to collapse. And hopefully Seattle can kind of get over that issue because they were considered, I think, very briefly the number 1 team. After Toronto had a bad start to stage 1 or whatever after the kickoff, it was and Seattle had a great start. So yeah, I mean, I don't know what to think about this team. I'm hopeful they can once again move up the rankings because it was fun when they were a top dog.
Yeah, they were really, really compelling to watch because they play such a in-your-face style. Somewhat similar to Florida, but a little bit more of a diversity in pacing. You had accuracy hitting those spots, and then Pred just absolutely flying, and that was just so entertaining to watch, especially on those fast maps like Bocage. But if we look at this week, well, actually, I'll hold off on the stats for now. I just want to talk about how they needed that win so bad because they came into stage 2 wanting to beat Boston because that's a team that they could compete with theoretically. And then they were probably thinking FaZe is going to be a lot more difficult. And then to get that win over the more difficult squad going into with stage 2 ongoing, I think they might come up with a run, but we'll have to see. If we look at stats, Mac is actually the only one that's positive right now.
Mac deserves more gas. Bro is damn right in the chat. This guy goes under the radar because he's kind of quiet. Did you say Mac or am I? I was saying Mac.
Yeah.
I don't know if you.
Mac. Yeah. And yeah, he had a really good start to stage 1, but I feel like the end of stage 1 qualifiers in the major, he wasn't really at that same level. But to see him come out hot easily with the highest slaying rating. He's averaging more than 3 kills higher than anyone on his team, and that's including Pred and Sib. And so he's the guy that's holding down the slaying right now, which is pretty insane. But yeah, I think we know what to expect from this team. When they're at their peak, they can compete with anyone. They can beat anyone. They just went through a slump recently, and I feel like this FaZe series, to edge it out as well, to just squeak by them and actually go 5 maps, I think that says a lot of composure on that side. And so I'm just excited to see what can happen.
Tourlane's going off in the chat. I'll follow me on Twitter. Okay, cool. Yeah, weird situation. I agree. I do respect and credit a lot the mental fortitude that it takes, that probably accuracy is instilled to a degree. Like, it's got to be so hard if you're Seattle after losing to Paris at the major, then getting beaten by Boston. Then you've got to play FaZe, and to actually come out with the belief you can win, let alone actually win. But just to win, you've got to believe you can win first, which is already a hurdle, you know, for a relatively new team like this. So that was what was impressive to me. I hope they can turn it around, because I think right now the top 5 that I described is very much like precarious, you know. Boston could get up there. Other teams could also get right back up there, especially with the way Thieves are looking right now. We've got to talk up FaZe quickly, though, just because the way they lost this series was rather surprising to me. You know, they, of course, I'm pretty sure Pred clutched, it was the 1v1 in round 11 in game 2 against Arcetes. They very much got away with it in the control. They go game 5 anyway, and you guys remember, like, back in Modern Warfare, they would always win their game. It was ridiculous, wasn't it? Like, the second half of Modern Warfare, I don't know how many game 5s they won in a row, but it was absurd. They'd always go game 5 and somehow win. Now, this year, very different story so far. When they played OpTic in the reverse sweep, they got 6-0'd game 5. And I was thinking, okay, was that just momentum for OpTic, the crowd behind them? Like, FaZe maybe got a bit nervous in that situation. You'd have thought in an online game against Seattle, that's where they would like say, okay, you know what, we didn't play great, but here we are, we're going to clutch them in search and destroy. Kind of like how they did against Paris on Berlin at the very first match of stage 1, when they went down 2-1, bounced back, and then they just won the game 5 quite comfortably. That's what I expected them to do, but they lost 6-2 again. Pretty much they got smoked in game 5. And this kind of habit of losing game 5s pretty emphatically is obviously not a good sign. And like, usually in these spots, when they lose series like this, they go back to the drawing board, they turn it around very quickly. But their next matches are not easy. They play London, they play Toronto, so 2 of the top 5 teams, you could probably argue. Then they play Florida, who knows, right? And Florida love Bacage, as do FaZe. So, you know, they don't have a free win on Bacage like they seem to get against most teams. And then they play OpTic. So FaZe are 0-1, and they have 4 of arguably the most difficult matches you're going to find in the league. So, I don't know, like, what are you thinking? Oh, you're on mute. But you're coming
Sorry,
back.
man. They lost.
This
is typical. We want to show, obviously.
Of course.
They arguably lost their easiest match, which is crazy to think about. They got a tough road, and that's why I assume EasyMac is in the shadows. He's grinding, bro. He is collecting every piece of data on every single
in the lab right now.
Yeah, and we know them. They go crazy when they're not winning, obsessive almost. So it'll be exciting to see the bounce back, because it might be fierce. But one thing I wanted to point out about that game 5, I'm really glad that it was Sib and Pred that won them that game 5. Like, Sib went 9-4, Pred went 8-5. Like, they're the ones that actually held it down, consumed the pressure, and won that match. So very exciting for Seattle. But you're right about FaZe. Like, usually they can always win a series before they even get to game 5, and then they could always have that buffer with game 5 and just rely on it if they go the distance. So, yeah, strange times for them, but I'm not worried about FaZe at all. We should be happy that they're not winning right now, because it's going to happen again. You're going to come back and win a couple stages. We just know that's going to happen. You got to realize that. And, yeah, so it's kind of a good thing. Like, revel in the fact that they're not completely shitting on everyone right now.
That's what's the best thing, because this time last stage, they were going like 11-0. So, well, this time last year, sorry, they were started off 11-0. We will see. I mean, look, they're incredible team, unbelievable talent. They do have the ability to just come out and smoke people. But who knows? I mean, RCT was talking about the fact that he doesn't like this game. He doesn't have fun on it, or that's kind of what he was implying. And that type of stuff does make a difference. I mean, the OpTic guys have said in podcasts and stuff that they really like, especially scrimming on this game. They really enjoy it, which so far that's making a difference. But
you got to take that with a grain of salt, because I think FaZe are used to being this good. OpTic, it's the first time in years that they've been this cohesive as a unit, enjoying practicing and having like this coaching staff that's able to dial them in. And I think that they're just obsessed with being really good right now. I don't think it's the game. I think it's the fact that they feel so good on the map. And with FaZe, I think regardless, I think our cities, he's saying he doesn't feel that good. That's probably a response to how things have been going. But in reality, his stats this year have been better than last year. And he's more involved. Like last year, he had to play a more methodical, slow role because the AR role was more dependent on getting spawns, being anchor. This year, it's far more in the mix. And so I think he doesn't really enjoy having to be that presence on the map as opposed to being the guy doing all the intangibles.
Yeah, I think I agree. We've got the Dime Minister in the chat baiting me. I checked my Twitter, but no news as of yet on the Clayster front. But maybe I'm just behind the times. Obviously, Lion's like 10 hours ahead or 11 hours ahead, so he gets the news ahead of us. That's how it works.
But I got to hold that information in, even though I know
exactly. You don't want to leak it, Yeah, precisely.
I'll do that.
So, yeah, I mean, like, FaZe, it's going to take a lot more than this to start the conversations of, this team is over, right? I still think they're going to come out next week and just go 2-0 and just say, what are you all talking about? We'll see. The first team they play next week is London. And just such an impressive week for London, I think, because Gizmo goes back to the UK. He's obviously been the online demon for them start of this year. He's had tough personal issues he's dealing with. I think the plan is him to still be back out for this coming week of matches. I believe they play Paris first, so should be a nice little warm-up. But PaulEhx comes in, and he was just out of control. Like, he played really well. To be fair, like, stats-wise, he didn't do anything absurd. I think he had a really good Berlin search and destroy. But outside of that, it was, again, like the other guys. That's what impresses me so much about London, is that every player has their moments, We've got Afro just playing pubs out there in the first series they played. Then Nasty all of a sudden out of nowhere just goes like 32 and 20. I think he's the guy that gets a lot of their hill time, and when he's having a big game, that's going to be great. And Zero, we know, he's come back to prove people wrong, because last year he had a very tough time, and one time I was on the flank when it was at a decent European hours. I went on, I said, if there's one player I want to see back in the league, it's Trey Zero Morris. And he comes back and he's showing why he's the real deal. And he unfortunately wasn't here last year. So that's why I was just, even the Los Angeles Thieves series was just New York. I don't even who cares? They beat New York, whatever. The Thieves series was the most impressive one because they chowed them straight up on Gavuti hardpoint. They beat them comfortably. So to me, they're PaulEhx or no PaulEhx, Gizmo comes back in, their system and their culture and their kind of friendship and chemistry is so good that they can just bring a new guy in and integrate him no problem. If he's that type of player, which PaulEhx seems to be, Gizmo should come back and this team should just keep on the train they're going. I think they're very much asserting themselves right now as the best team not called OpTic or FaZe.
I agree with that. And the fact that, let me take a look at the stats. The fact that PaulEhx came straight in, slotted in, and fit perfectly with this dynamic was pretty insane. But I think that had a lot to do with his playstyle being rather similar to Gizmo and his fitting perfectly. I think because they are so break heavy and hardpoint, they don't really need to go over much strategy on rotation. They just need to know where everyone is when they're going in for those breaks. And I think that worked perfectly with him. Because if we look at his stats, he actually had the lowest KD on the team, but the rest of the team is all just frying. Like Afro had a 1.24 for the last two matches, Nasty a 1.14, Zero a 1.12, and then PaulEhx at the bottom with a 1.06, which is still insane. And if we look at their hill time, we can tell that they're all stacking in the hill and holding it as a unit. Afro with 77 seconds hill time, Nasty with 70, Zero with 80, PaulEhx with 73. And you don't see that from teams often. Most of the time you see one or two players with a lot of hill time, but this team's stacking a lot of the time when they get in. Their S&D's looking insane, all of them above a 1.08, Nasty with a 1.5. And their control, that's their weakest mode right now in the slaying department. But overall, they looked insane. And they looked just as good as they looked with Gizmo. And so, who knows? What happens if Gizmo comes back and the team drops off? Do we potentially see a PaulEhx change in there? I don't think anyone's thought about that.
I was wondering about that today. Actually, I didn't mention it, but I was kind of thinking, okay, what would happen here? Because it was so good with Paul. I don't know. I don't imagine that'll happen, but it just still shows that if any of them is underperforming, their system is so well designed that they can actually make that work. Including with PaulEhx, they still seem to be a very competitive team. So it's just, I think it's good because Gizmo will come back with the fire under him, thinking like, well, PaulEhx came in and played my role great. So I've got to prove that I deserve my spot here as well. And they know they could drop me and still be good. So I think it's good to have your players thinking that. Like, you want your players to be motivated to keep playing well. Because if they ever get complacent and feel like they're undroppable, then that's when the team starts falling off. You've got to have that pressure. So I think if anything, it should be good for the team. We'll see. The other end of the coin on the kind of European team spectrum is the Paris Legion, baby. They're back in business. We thought they were going to be charging up the ladder, and they're back where they belong. It was, that was maybe a bit mean. But still, I mean, look, it's a poor showing, after the major one promise that they had. I mean, like Jimbo against Minnesota, he goes 50 and 102. I think that's probably the worst KD we've ever seen in a 5-map series, at least in the CDL days. Because I think we've had, like when OpTic got 3-0'd last year by FaZe, it was like a 0.4 from Envoy and Formal and stuff. But in a 5-map series, not great. A lot of people said this kind of hyper aggro style he has just doesn't work against pros, especially a disciplined, slowish team like Minnesota. You're just going to get run over. They were lucky, very much lucky, to even be up 2-0 in that series because of the ridiculous play that Stanley made that I don't want to get frustrated talking about again. That was my exact reaction. And so they go up 2-0 against Minnesota, and then they get swept. I mean, the series they had against LAG as well, like the comms, poor Donny Tentman, he's trying his best. He's slaying. He's looking good at this game. He's on the minimum salary, I guess. And he's trying his best, right? And it seems like since they got rid of Fellow, this is the thing to me about the way Paris have done this, is that they've not kept Fellow on the bench. And yes, they could probably bring him back because he's probably not going to get signed elsewhere. But like, they didn't even keep him, right? They just dropped him, released him from the contract, and brought Jimbo in instead with full confidence that this Jimbo move is going to work. But it seems to me that they looked best. Yes, they came top 8, but they won a series against Seattle with Fellow in the team. But when Fellow was looking all right, and I think Fellow, and even Shotzi said on stream just a couple of days ago that he reckons Fellow is a great teammate. He did good things for Dallas last year when he was forced to. He might not be the greatest player in the world, but at least he has good comms, knows what he's doing. Whereas Jimbo just doesn't really have that, right? So now you've kind of got to ask, well, if Jimbo has a poor week coming up, then the team was better with Fellow. We want to get him back, but we've now just released him from the contract, haven't even kept him on the bench. So it's just Paris things, to be honest. I hope Jimbo can turn it around, but it's like you've got Temp sitting there with John, who never talked anyway, Gravity, who's just getting used to things, and then this new kid in Jimbo. It's just, it's shambolic, ladies and gentlemen. I know people, Americans love when I use that word because apparently it's not common in America.
Shambolic.
It's a good one.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, the thing about Fellow that he provides is we've known for years, one of the most positive people in the scene. It's like he's just this ball of positive energy. And I think that's a great thing for a team. It's just he can't really slay that well. That's been his downfall. But yeah, looking at this team, it's really strange because they did have that 2-0 advantage over ROKKR. They were looking solid, and then the entire thing collapsed. There was talk about Jimbo having a high ping, and then that got removed. Apparently, he just didn't have a ping above 40. He had a lower than 40. I think. Yeah.
They said.
And so he was not really at a disadvantage, and he's getting he was free smoke on that series. It was unbelievable. So I don't know what to say about this team because we wanted them to make this change a while ago, this two-person change. They make the two-person change. They leave John and Temp, who have looked okay, especially Temp, and then things look worse than ever. Because how do you come back from that series? You have to win the next two series if you're them, and their next two matches are London and they've got a New York series next week, boys.
Ah, they do. Yes,
They might be all right.
This coming Saturday. Nah, New York are winning that.
That's the biggest matchup of next week, in my opinion.
It's the battle of the shitters. Yeah, let's go.
Well, don't be so mean.
Nah, well, I mean, look, it's battle for 11th place because right now no one really knows.
Well, I mean, yeah, I'm excited to see that match. Honestly, it might sound crazy, but that's the game that I'm most looking forward to.
I agree. We can dive into that one when we get to that point. So, okay, Paris. What even more to say? Minnesota, they beat Paris this week. They went 1-1. Again, I'm not really that impressed. They made this role change. Toronto beat them. We've kind of got a touch on this. Flex role, Priest on the sub. To me, and I know this wasn't true in Black Ops 4 when Priester was great on the kind of the entry sub, but I've always felt like Priester is the most flexible player in the world, pretty much, through his career. The most versatile, up there with Zero. I've always thought Priester and Zero are the two players that can run basically any role. And there's probably others that come into the mix nowadays, but I think that Priest has always been in that kind of boat, which makes, I've always thought that if you've got the player who's like the most flexible player in COD history on your team, you should probably have him in the flex role. Now, at least you have the choice, because then he can use both guns. It makes sense, right?
It does make sense.
It does make sense. I think the logic kind of checks out there. But, they've gone down the route of putting him on the sub, and I think probably the pacing looks marginally better, but just looking at the way some of these other teams have formed, I wonder if at some point you decide, Maniac, you're a good player, but the iron boots just don't work that great in this game. We're going to attach our main AR, we're going to put Priester back on the flex, and we're going to have Stanley +1. Because then you're going to be quicker. And I think that's what they need, to be honest, in the respawns. Now, attach main AR is a pretty ballsy call, given he's been an SMG for most of his career. But then again, I was thinking about this. Like, if you put Scump on the main AR, he'd be fine, no doubt. So it's like, we haven't really seen that before with an SMG becoming a main AR. He's been an SMG the whole career. But I think it's
strange. Yeah, sorry for cutting off. That's such a strange idea, but I kind of fuck with it. Because we talked about Attach last week. He is such a pre-aim heavy SMG. And in this game, I'm not too certain that that's actually a good thing. We've seen that the most effective SMGs are the ones that are cracked out slide cancelling every second corner. And that's not really in his or Scump's nature, to be honest. And that's why we've seen Scump be so successful on Gavutu with the AR as well. But I like that. And I don't think dropping Major Maniac's a very good point, because I think he's actually been really good this year. But he is a bit slower than his team. And that's the same case with like accuracy on Seattle Surge. He's a lot slower than his teammates. But at times when his teammates are frying, he could be that extra player to finish off kills and trade them out. But you're right. I think that could be, if things stay as they are, that could be a good move. And it will be quite interesting to see how they go, because that's a good storyline.
I mean, they don't have a substitute right now, So as far as I'm aware. So, I think just bring in a substitute as an SMG, make it known to the team. They're like, there's someone there. They're ready to take your spot if things go sour, and see what happens. I don't know if Minnesota can stick out another year with the same. I know, obviously they didn't stick out the entirety of last year with the same team. They made some moves that, Stanley came in and they got better. But they were confident after last year that this squad was going to work. Hasn't really done so far. I mean, their next matches are up against Boston. They then play LA Thieves. Then they play New York. So it's really not the hardest schedule for them. Getting the chance to play Paris and New York in one stage. We're eating good. Especially compared to last stage when they had a very tough run. So they should get through. But there's a decent chance they still go 2-3 here or something, and they map count isn't great. Like it's not out of the realms of possibility. So yeah, I think they've just got to keep an eye on things because they're always going to be a team that's a threat against the top squads. They're never a team you want to play. Like you see Minnesota in the bracket, you're like, oh my god, we really have to play them because it's tough to be that confident when they can always take you to a game 5 and win. But yeah, I don't know. I think they have to keep an eye on things there because there's plenty of talented players out there, and I think you don't want to miss out. Like they did such a great job last year of getting the standee of the season, right? There is a next standee out there, probably. Maybe he's already been signed, but they might miss out on that possibility if they get too like stuck in the ways of this team, you know.
Well, standee after standee turned out to be Afro. And so who's the next Afro?
Yeah, true, the next Afro. Good point. Well, probably out there somewhere. Can't get lucky twice, says Lewis. Maybe true. Okay, LA Thieves, baby. It's time to talk about them. A difficult week, right? Don't get me wrong. I mean, they play London, they play OpTic. Not the easiest week. 2 of the top 3 teams in the game. And they played great against OpTic, or well, great with an asterisk we can discuss. Better, let's just say. Okay, so eventually, as we all expected, their respawn play eventually is going to fall off. They're not just going to be a 90% hardpoint team for the entire season. It's not how it works. They've got down to a more respectable level. Teams have obviously watched their Gavutu hardpoint and said, okay, they do this, this, this. We can outplay them on this particular hill by doing this. And they're kind of getting exposed a little bit on that map lately, to be honest. The London series was just tough. I mean, the S&Ds against OpTic were really the most frustrating thing to watch. When OpTic win, it's better for views for my channel. So I wanted OpTic to win. But just watching this was remarkable because the amount of clutch rounds that, honestly, like OpTic were giving away advantages, and then they were still somehow clutching the rounds. Like, I don't understand what Thieves are doing. The real moments, like, not only did they lose like a couple of 1v2s they should never have realistically lost, but there was a good like 3 rounds where they had a 4v3 in their favor that they lost. At least 2 rounds, maybe 3. And it was the 5-4 rounds when OpTic decided to go B. Thieves are ready for it. They're set up shop, they're ready to go. They kill the guy who's trying to plant the bomb. And it's a 4v3. There's no way you lose that round, right? Like, you have the bomb down on the site, and OpTic get through. They get a couple of kills. They take it 5-5. And then the round 11 was, if anything, more embarrassing when they trade out the first blood. Shotzi just says, all right, lads, let's wrap all the way back to our spawn, make a play through the B building. And 40 seconds later, Thieves are still sitting there by the bomb without even having picked up the bomb yet. 2 of them get shot at the back. So it's like these... Yeah. The openings to the rounds were good, and some of the plays mid-round were pretty decent as well. But it was like those kind of clutch moment plays where they really fell short, and that's really the problem here for them. And yes, okay, the Desert Siege, they won 6-0, but OpTic we'll talk about OpTic in a second, actually, and what they decided to do this series. But, it's not great because they play next Minnesota, LAG, and Seattle. So it's still not the easiest run. And because they're now 2-6 in map count, if they win 3 series, all of them, then yes, they get to winners. But if they win just 2 series and they're 2-3, they're already -4 in map counts, which could put them in a spot where they end up getting a losers bracket spot at the major. Like, that's already a reasonable possibility here.
Yeah. If we look at the first series with London, they chowed London twice on Gavutu and lost both times with a sub. Remember, they were saying, don't chow us on Gavutu.
Well, it always comes back to bite you eventually.
People are chowing them on Gavutu and they're winning. But then the OpTic series, they destroyed them in that first S&D, completely smoked them 6-0. And that was a shock to us because I think halfway through the major, we were looking at OpTic and thinking they're the best S&D team in the game. Then they go up against FaZe and then they're the best respawn team in the game. We're like, whoa. But it's like OpTic somewhat forgot about their search, it feels like. I'm not too sure what's going on there. I think it might have just been the map itself. But that game 5 is genuinely some of the worst search and destroy I've ever seen. That you talked about that round 10 when they killed the guy off the bomb. Was it Dashi? No, it was it?
Probably. I don't know who was planning. It might have been Shotzi with the bomb, but
bomb is down, and then Draza is the only one on the site. The other players are still chilling around church and on the other site, and then nothing happens. He just gets crowded on the site by himself. If they decide to rotate back to the bomb, they win the round, LA Thieves. So that's ridiculous. They should have honestly won 6-2 that map. And then round 11, they just were so slow. Didn't even think about the idea that OpTic were outsmarting them and got smoked. So even though they look so strong in the first S&D, they struggle mid to end of the round. They're really good at getting picks. They're really bad at securing the round. And that's what they got to work on. Because their respawn as well in that series against OpTic, especially on Tuscan, they got destroyed in that control, like 3-0. A 3-0 control, they won 2 offenses OpTic. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, honestly, that was the thing about OpTic, really. Like, they were just unfuckwittable, to be honest, in the respawns on Tuscan. Like, it was just outrageous. Yeah, what else to say about this team, to be honest? Just quickly on Thieves, like, if they do go to losers, right? So let's say they don't make it through, they lose either one of those series pretty badly, they find themselves in losers bracket for the major, they come like, I don't know, top 8 or something, right? So then there's 2 majors back to back, top 6, top 8, even top 6, top 6, for example. Last year, that would not be good enough to keep the same roster, because JCap made it quite clear that he thought if the team does not have potential to beat the #1 team in the game, which obviously right now they've shown that potential, in fairness. But, you know, last year he was like, well, this new roster can't beat FaZe. We keep getting smoked by them. So let's change again. Is there even a realistic move to be made here? Because the last few series, in fairness, Draza has underperformed. Pentagram is there on the bench. I think Octane and Kenny are practically irreplaceable, and Envoy has been great. And I really like Draza and rate him as a player. But I think that if there's anyone who's the most replaceable, it's always kind of been Draza. And the last few series haven't been great for him. So I do think that if they have a really tough time the next week and they struggle at the major, I think there's a decent chance they make a move there for stage 3.
Yeah, I could see that. I just find this roster to have such a high ceiling that making a change right now would be detrimental. We saw that last year. Every time they made a change, it reset any progress that they had. And I mean, JCap got memed for it last year, even though I guess it wasn't totally his decision. He was surrounding it. So I think if they stick with this roster, they really need to find an event win, especially before, I mean, they need to win this event in reality. Otherwise, I can see them making a change. But I think that would be a dumb decision. They should try and stick it out, because teams like ROKKR last year, they went from being bad, putting in Standy, being good, but not being great, sticking with it, and then eventually being champions in stage 5. So I can see LA Thieves sticking with it, but I don't know, man. They really should have won that OpTic series. Like, if they'd won that, everything's different. The whole storyline's different. Like, wow, this team can win a series even after getting smoked 2 maps. But now we're looking at it like these guys can't finish a Surge, and we're not even thinking about the fact they got blown out in 2 respawns. So I don't know, man. I feel like they have so much potential, and everyone was so high on them going into stage 1 major that, you know, you'd have to kind of stick on it. I think you have to stick with this team.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough for now. I mean, look, we'll see how it turns out for them. Look, we've got to talk real quick because Crone just dropped the Crone bomb. He reckons that PaulEhx is he's coming into the subliners. They're also actively pursuing a second player. So, look, is our prediction going to be correct? Like, just to mention it real quick, I'll throw it to you. Like, I think their plan is, right, if they're going to pursue a second player, is that they'll probably, I don't know if he actually says it specifically in the article, or if, you know, maybe minus Clayster, minus Neptune. But yeah, I don't know. It seems like it's coming to fruition line.
Yeah, and I think that was a move that we expected. He played too good not to be on the team at this point, because a lot of the time we've seen this year when players are brought in, they play like shit. So the fact that he played good, I mean, you had to expect it. I don't know who their second player will be. I'll take a look at the article real quick if there's anything on that.
He doesn't really say much. He just says the next series the roster should include PaulEhx as well as the potential of another player if the franchise decides to move in that direction.
Nice.
It doesn't really say much more. So it kind of implies to me that they want to bring PaulEhx in for Neptune, but then that would probably mean Crim on a sub and Clay on the main AR, and then you're thinking that's a bit of, you know, we already talked about this earlier. Just called it to a T, to be honest, chat.
Do you not think that it's Clay out, PaulEhx in?
Honestly, might be.
It'll make the most sense
That
for
could
the
work
team.
as well. So maybe we didn't call it 2 at 2.
Put Crim on the main AR. I don't know, because I
Uh,
felt like an issue with that team was that Clay, and he changed it for this stage, but in the first stage, Clay was an overly aggressive AR, and we've seen that for the last 3 years. He's been a very aggressive AR, and it just seemed like his subs weren't getting the opportunities on the map because he was just getting into so many gunfights. But I don't, who really knows with this roster? I mean, there's so much talent and challenges that they could probably pick from a hat and it'll be better than what they've got right now.
Well,
I
yeah, I
must have,
suppose so. You're back in business now, I think. Okay. Well, got to talk about the other side of the equation real quick on the optic side. So, like, they still showed they have this clutch factor. I honestly think this is pretty much the best way for Optic this possibly could have gone, because they've just showed that they're just ridiculously dominant on the Tuscans. I mean, they just completely smoked them. Map 1, Map 3. There would have been questions about the series stats if they had a loss, because they outplayed them by like 60 kills, 70 kills in the series, and almost lost game 5 round 11, which there would have been questions about that, to be honest. But anyway, they do win, so it's fine, I guess. And probably the most clinical hardpoint and control I've seen this entire season, frankly. Now, arguably, they were almost not like disrespecting Thieves, but I thought it was a pretty baller play to come out and say that they're testing out maps here, right? Because they want to be a team that in the best of 9, this is why FaZe was just unbeatable last year in grand finals, because during the regular season, against some of the weaker opposition, they would routinely practice maps that they were maybe decent on in practice, but hadn't converted yet into good results in tournament play. And they would often just try out maps. Now, OpTic tried out Siege S&D and Berlin Hardpoint in this series, both maps they haven't really played at all, and apparently have been looking okay on in practice, but translating that into reality is very different. So I was surprised that it was LA Thieves they decided to do this against, right? Because they have, I guess, theoretically easier matches coming up. I mean, next week they play Seattle, Florida, they play LAG and FaZe. Okay, so, maybe Seattle. I mean, Seattle, you'd have said they're weaker than Thieves coming in here. You'd have thought nowadays you might not say that, but still, if there's a series to try out some other maps on, you might not choose Thieves to do so. They kind of get punished, really, losing both those maps, and they get lucky in the game 5 to walk away with a victory anyway. But the way it's worked out, long and the short of it is, it was pretty much the perfect series for them, because not only does it kind of keep the complacency at bay that they're not just. They can be beaten. They should have been beaten, arguably. There's still plenty of work to do. That now they sure realize that after the series, the S&D was not as coherent and as disciplined as it was at the major, but they still get the victory, right? And the 1-0 is key when you look at the next few somewhat difficult games they have to play. So I think Rambo will be looking at this thinking, okay, this is actually a great result because we've learned a lot. We're going to make sure we keep our heads down. Because that was the thing with OpTic last year. Whenever they got a big victory, even in a regular league play game, they would take their foot off the gas. Can't afford to do that because FaZe, I'm sure, are going to come with a vengeance this week, as are other teams.
Yeah, I agree with that. They trying out maps, and I think that's a good thing because it's the first time OpTic's been in the position where they're good enough at certain maps to still win a series while trialing maps. But they look bad on the maps that they aren't good at. Like Desert Siege, they looked horrendous. It was very strange. Thieves were just piecing them. They were always, well, I think First Blood, it was 4-2 to LA, and then OpTic still lost 6-0. And then the Berlin Hardpoint, it just felt like, and I heard this on the flank, the maps OpTic aren't as good on in Hardpoint are the maps that are more traditional COD maps with rotations that actually invite moving around the map and playing more slowly. And so they're really good at slaying, which is why they're so competent at these more mixy maps. But when it comes to Berlin, I don't think they've looked good on it at all, really, in S&D since I've watched them. Oh, sorry, not S&D, in Hardpoint since I've watched them. But in S&D, obviously, they're quite good at that map. I just found it was just good to see them trialing maps in total. But yeah, they looked pretty sloppy on the maps that they haven't tried. I just think they need to really focus on what they did wrong in those maps. Because if those come up in a grand final again against a team that's better and more competent at those slower maps, it could be a little bit interesting. But the fact they're trialing them shows that they're confident.
Yeah, agreed. I think the next time they play those games, they'll probably be in a better shape, right? Like next time they play them, they'll probably play them again against someone else, especially if they get like if they beat Seattle, go 2-0. If they take down Florida, for example, against LAG, they'll probably throw something like that in because LAG quite like Berlin Hardpoint as well. So I wouldn't be surprised to see that map pop up again in that series and get another shot at it against another decent team because that's the thing. You've got to get to grand finals, but you've also got to win them. And I wouldn't be surprised if they're matching FaZe up again at some point or another. And we know that FaZe love a deep map pool. That's what they're all
Yeah.
about. There's not all that many
But
maps in this game, though.
they learned their lesson, FaZe, because they didn't have a very good map pool in Modern Warfare because they got to seven grand grand
Something
finals
like
and only
that.
won two.
Yeah.
And so they learned their lesson, came back in Cold War and became a lot more methodical with their practice and like actually integrating the practice into their matches as well. And OpTic are doing that now. And they're trying to become that new dynasty. And I can see it. The fact that let's see, how much did they outslay by? 30, 33, 46, 69.
What
That's a
about
good
that?
number. It's a good number. Yeah, that's
Jesus.
insane.
That's quite something. I mean, the control of the hardware was just brutal. Like
Yeah.
the control especially was just phenomenal because like have we seen a team win like that yet with two offenses? Because
No.
both the offenses were incredible. Like especially round 3, I thought was the most impressive. I'm sure other teams are going to be watching the VOD thinking, bloody hell, like we need to start playing Tuscan offense like this because it was like 11-9, and then within about 10 seconds, OpTic had 4 deads, and they'd killed them off spawn, and it was 11-3, and it was round over. They didn't even need to cap the point; they just got the kills. So
Yeah.
it reminds me a little bit of Gavutu in a way that, like, on Gavutu, you can on offense, if you get to the power positions, you can kill some of the defenders and get like a 3-4 life leads. But then OpTic were just so good at just instantly converting that. They didn't even need the point. They were like, we have 50 seconds. There's 3 lads left. Let's just kill them.
Yeah.
It was, that was really impressive stuff.
Dryza went 8-22 though on that Tuscan control. He started off.
Octane went 8-19 as well or something.
He did, yeah. And that, especially from Octane, is a shocker. I did not expect that, and it just shows how good OpTic are moving around the map. Because people always look at slaying numbers and assume, oh, they just got better gun skill, but that's not true. They're just moving around the map perfectly, holding lanes, and just being decisive with their decision making. So it's really nice to see because OpTic, it's notorious in the last few years that this is not how they play. They're fundamentally they've not been the strongest. And so the fact that they're putting teams like LA Thieves, who were considered a favorite in the last tournament, in the blender on their strong maps is sick. I just hope that they don't forget about the maps that they're good at, and then suddenly they're kind of good on every map, as opposed to being extremely good on some maps, because then that doesn't help anything.
Yeah, Omar was asking in the chat, and I saw a question from kind of Garage Tech 19 earlier about like just kind of the maps and the rotation that we have at the moment. That what are they thinking there? Right now, there wasn't really any time to test new maps between stage 1, stage 2. There was an entire month right after stage 2 to try and get something to happen here. Now, Casablanca, people say it might work for control. I don't know. Haven't seen much gameplay of it. There was also like Omar was kind of wondering if some more traditional World War II-esque maps come back that play a bit more like Berlin. Like, what does that mean for a team like OpTic, right? Because they seem to thrive in the very. We don't really need to rotate that hard, and we'll just break the front of the hill. And even though OpTic, like their break percentage isn't actually crazy, I think because they were probably just because they were holding pretty much all the hills against the team that they played this week in Thieves, especially in the hard points. But yeah, like, what do you think? If they do add more maps to the rotation, there'll be quite a difference. Like, if you add a St. Marie Dumont, or, with obviously wishful thinking here, like a London Docks or something, and that does arrive, which is plausible to happen at some point, stage 3, we can hope, I guess. If that does happen, there's a very big gap between a Bocage hardpoint and St. Marie, for example, in the way it's played. And I don't know, that might throw teams off a lot because there's there hasn't been that much of a difference, I suppose, in previous games on how different maps play. Each team can kind of play their hardpoint game and apply it to most maps relatively effectively. But I don't know, that would be a big, like, kind of, if the map pool does change more in that direction, it probably doesn't favor OpTic. I don't know what you think. Because right now, the way it is, the map set's great for OpTic.
Sorry, my dog's going ape shit. 1 second.
All good. That's fine. I
Just
can
continue
keep going.
talking. I need to sort this out.
Yeah, I'll go. Lion's got to deal with the whole dog situation. Honestly, I think I was speaking straight facts. The other question that Abra raised about envoying the bomb GT, because this is something that people talked about, because he was, 2-10 game 5, which was not pretty. Have the dogs been dealt with?
Have relaxed. We were talking about the map picks, right?
I was.
Or the map. I'm thinking, well, we don't really know how those maps are going to play on this COD because the movement is so different. It might completely change up the play style, like slide canceling corners and whatnot. That wasn't a thing. It was dolphin diving. It was very slow movement that year. A lot of pre-aims. I think the difference is going to be who's going to adapt to those other maps most. Because right now, there isn't really a map in the set that's like London Docks. I guess Berlin somewhat, but that's not really. I think if they were going to bring back a map that I'd want to see, and I think would be like perfect for this COD, it would be Gibraltar. Because I like the spacing on that map. I like where the hills are. And to be honest, that was my favorite map on World War II. That's what I think of when I think of World War II. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I mean, that would be good times. Gibraltar, man, I must say, it's a memorable map. For me, not for the right reasons, but honestly, using a PPSH and trying to run out of that tunnel thing into that hard point, the circle one, and just getting the nades are coming in from all directions. You're duck and cover, trying to dolphin dive to the hill. You've been naded.
That was the way you would fix that. Don't push cave, push mid, get control of mid, and then push them out.
No, I agree. Eventually,
that.
you did kind of figure that, but sometimes you have a choice. It's like you got like 5 seconds left because usually the hard point would end on that hill. But yeah,
points are good at times because it allows for the team that's playing more correctly, who are playing for spawns, to actually get a huge advantage, as opposed to it being so hit the front. You know, like it's not easy. You actually have to have map control on maps like that, and that's what I somewhat miss about a lot of the maps in this COD, is that you can just destroy an advantage for the other team.
Yeah, World War II was great like that. You know, I remember rotating to P2 like 40 seconds early or something, because once you got to P2 and set up on the head glitch back there, you were so hard to stop. And once you have that hill control, it's pretty much torched because they can't really get in the front on that hard point. The Ryan Bacardi hard point, I call that one. Yeah, World War II Rab Rage was good times, no doubt. The streams are fun. The GBs off stream were even more rage inducing. USS Texas, baby. Okay, beautiful. Good discussion on the maps. Let's talk about the upcoming week's matches. I don't know if you want to bring this up on stream, Omar. Let me know when it's appearing. I think we'll just firstly, we'll look at the standings. If you just want to bring the standings up, and then we can talk about the actual games. So the standings are very interesting. Of course, 4 of these teams have only played 1 game, so it's a little bit less representative. But Florida leading the way, baby. They're 2-0. They're 6-0 map counts. London right there at 2-0 with a 6-1. Boston, Toronto, OpTic all with a win. Then LAG, Minnesota, Seattle 1-1. And then we've got FaZe, LA Thieves, Paris and New York. So Paris and New York already finding ways to be at the bottom. But FaZe and LA Thieves, you wouldn't necessarily expect them to be there in 4 or 3 matches respectively time. But still, it does... FaZe are probably in a slightly less precarious position because they still have 4 games, but 4 very challenging games, it must be said, that we'll talk about here in a second. And Thieves also, their map count is just not good. And anything can happen here. So, like, just looking at these standings, what are you thinking, Lion? Because Florida are 2-0, and the map count they have, they should be good to go. So you've then got to find 4 teams that aren't going to qualify. And it's got to be said that, like, Minnesota don't have the hardest schedule. Paris and New York are probably chalked. But in fairness, one of Paris and New York gets a win because they have to play each other. So at least like one of them has one win. I don't know. I feel like we're gonna get some upsets here. I feel like a big team's gonna find themselves in losers.
And that'll be exciting, honestly. And I think I'm feeling Thieves, just because their map count right now is really bad, and then they've got to play just this week. They're playing ROKKR, and then the last week they've got Seattle and LAG. So they
LAG.
theoretically should go 3-0, but if they don't get the vetoes right and they get maps that don't favor them, we've seen that they can get smoked on those maps. So right now, I think that they just need to lock in, bro, because if they don't swiftly win these 3 series, it could be looking dark. And winners round 1 would be tough because they were just a top 3 team, or considered top 3 and best hardpoint team in the game.
Like
So that's
everyone
my
basically
feeling.
picked them as the favorite for the majors. I was surprised.
Yeah.
Like all the reverse sweep guys said they were going to win the major. I was like, hang on a second, let's calm it down. But I kind of agree. I think the other thing as well is that the Minnesota series, they play on Sunday, so they've got quite a wait. And it's just as we talked about Minnesota, not a team you want to play because, especially when you're not confident in your search, and I'm sure that's what a lot of their focus is on this week. It's like you don't want to get to a game 5 against Minnesota and think, well, here we go, we're playing Minnesota game 5, the game 5 specialists, and we're sitting here having just thrown one away against OpTic and with a huge amount of pressure on the series. So I think that's kind of the issue. I think the FaZe will be fine. I don't think that they're going to be in losers, but I think that there's a decent chance they go like, they could even go 2-3. I think they'll probably go like 3-2. But regardless of how that happens, they're going to get a seeding, probably, which is somewhere middle of the pack. They might get, it could go 4-1 and be like number 1 seed. But I think it's more likely they end up like number 4 seed, number 5 seed. And theoretically, let's say they were like number 6 seed, then they're going to play. I don't know. What it means is that FaZe are not going to have a first round match where they're number 1 seed and we've got like a number 8 seed they're playing against. I think it's much more probable that we have some crazy first round matches, even if there isn't some upsets here in the standings. We're gonna get like I don't know. We could get like a FaZe OpTic round 1. Like it's plausible.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Yeah, because I don't know. I think losing to Seattle is an interesting one. But we've said before we think they're going to lock in, and when they lock in, they're one of the top teams. So I wouldn't be surprised if they go 4-1. But in reality, I think should we do like a breakdown of where we think the teams are going to finish, like from first to last?
That'd be interesting.
I
Yeah,
feel like there'll be a quicker way to just judge exactly where we think.
I
So
mean,
if we were
sure.
gonna go
Yeah, I mean,
number
we can look
one,
at the matches. I don't know if you want to bring up the matches on stream, Omar, now, because that will give. We can then talk through like who they play.
yeah. If we start at 12, we may as
Beautiful.
well get 12 and 11 out of the way. Do you think New
Okay.
York 12, or
No,
do you think that they're
New York
gonna?
11th, baby.
Okay,
I have
Paris
faith.
12.
I think New York are beating Paris. I think, yeah, that's my
Okay,
thinking.
and then in the 10th seed, who do you have? I'm feeling a Minnesota ROKKR in 10th.
Yeah, I actually was going to say Minnesota as well. So given we both had that on our mind, I think we have to lock it in. They don't have the easiest run. They do play New York though. Like, there's no way they lose to New York, right?
Well, maybe with the changes, who knows?
In fairness, last stage they went 2-3 and were 10th seed, weren't they? So I think we're going to have to do the same prediction again.
Yeah.
Okay,
9th,
2-3, 10th seed.
I'm feeling Thieves in 9th.
Yeah, let's lock that in. I like that. I like that call. It's a little bit of a hot take, but yeah, Thieves and ROKKR 9th and 10th. Wow, we are on fire today with the predictions.
Wow.
That's a big ball move right there.
And then we've got 8th. Who are you thinking out of Seattle, ROKKR, LAG, OpTic, Toronto, Boston, London?
We're already locked ROKKR in. So I think the 8th seed will probably be a 2-3 team that has a decent map count. And I think just I want to look at like, because Seattle right now are kind of there. I'm looking at Seattle's games. They play LAG, they play LA Thieves. There's a decent chance they go 2-3 there. Yeah, I'm going to say Seattle, I think 8. I don't, because I think they're going to lose to OpTic and they'll beat one of the LA teams and they have a good enough map count to get through.
Yep, so Seattle 8th. 7th, I'm feeling...
Boston looking at right now.
Boston, I want to know. I'm feeling LAG will be in that 7th spot.
Yeah, I
I
like
think
it.
they'll go. I think they'll probably be the best. Wait, so next week they're playing Seattle, LA, and OpTic. Yeah, I think they'll be the best 2 and 3 team, in my opinion, and they'll be in 7th.
Yeah, okay. I think that's actually a good shout. So then we've got 6 teams to decide. I'm actually, I honestly, the more I think about it, I think FaZe is just going to go on a run here. I'm actually going to take Florida in 6th because I think I think they might sneak out another win, but I think they're definitely going to be at least 2 and 2, and it'll be either 2 and 3 or 3 and 2, one of the two. So I think that's going to be good enough for like 6th. But they have great map counts. They might actually be 5th. So maybe that's a little bit underrating them. Maybe Boston 6th. I don't know. What do you think, man?
I think Boston 6th, because if we look at who they're playing, all the people they're playing are going to be above them in the rankings. Because they're playing Toronto, they're playing Florida, and they're playing London.
They play Minnesota though. Oh no, they play Minnesota as well. They have 4 games. Yeah. They still have 4 games.
So yeah, right. So I see them going 3 and 2 and beating one of these top teams, but that means that we have to drop like Toronto below them, if that's the case. But then Toronto play New York and Paris.
Yeah, Toronto. So, yeah. Agreed. Good point on that front. Okay, so we're gonna go. Yeah, so we've got LAG 7th. No, but Toronto got to be higher than that because they're already 1 and 0. They play New York and Paris. What do you think?
Yeah, but so is Boston.
Yeah, fair point. I don't mind either way. I think Boston should be behind Ultra there. I think they're just the worst team.
So Boston 6th.
Yeah, okay. Boston 6th. Do we get Ultra 5th?
Yes.
And then we go. Okay, Ultra 5th. Then we probably go Mutineers, right? Because they'll be 3 and 2.
Yeah, but then there's FaZe as well. Do you think FaZe is going to win all 4?
It's a good question.
Because their map count isn't ideal.
I don't think they will actually. I think we could put them 4th, and that gives us a FaZe Toronto round 1 with a major.
Yeah.
And that's spicy. So let's do that. We'll lock it in. FaZe 4th, I think that's probably good. And then I guess we put Florida 3rd.
Yeah.
And then we've got London versus OpTic for the top seed.
I don't see OpTic losing a match, honestly, this stage. So
London
I think
play
they're going to go 5-0
Paris.
flawless.
And London play FaZe. So I agree. Okay, so let's recap. We've got OpTic number 1, FaZe 2nd seed, 3rd is Florida. Then we've got...
No, you missed London.
Oh, sorry. Wait, what am I tripping? London 2. I said that wrong. OpTic 1, London 2. Then we had Florida 3.
FaZe.
Do we have Florida 3 or FaZe? I thought we had Florida 3.
No, we had FaZe 3. Let me type it out in the chat.
This is fake news. We had Florida 3.
You're right.
Because we had Toronto FaZe round 1.
Yeah, so, you're right.
We're tripping, boys. But I think this is a class prediction. We've got Florida 3.
In the chat.
FaZe 4. Toronto 5. Boston 6. LAG 7th. Seattle 8th. Then we've got
LA Thieves,
Minnesota, New York, Paris. That's our list. So sorry, we winged it. We completely winged this, boys. So sorry about that, Omar. It was completely off the cuff. I didn't know we were going to do this. So we could have done a graphic, but we just winged it. And if we're right, we're right. If we're wrong, it's fine. We could even do a Twitter graphic, like predictions, our bracket predictions, or our kind of stage predictions. Before we finish out the show, it's been a cracker. Let's just pick out some games for this week that we think are the most interesting, because I think every week gets better. Maybe with the exception of maybe week 3 isn't quite as spicy, but week 3 there's already so many storylines. It's great, but I think this week is more interesting than the last. Paris play. Okay, New York, Paris, right? I know that's kind of one of your big ones you want to look at. I'm really excited for FaZe London actually as well. I think that's going to be, because if London are back in full force, let's say they've just beaten Paris, like FaZe are not going to have an easy time there, because London are not going to let them play Bacage, which means they're going to play a Gavutu probably. There's going to be maybe a Berlin in there, maybe a Tuscan in there. Maps that London are very good on. So I think that FaZe have a lot to be concerned about in that series. So I think the FaZe are probably going to find a way to take it. I think they'll really be going hard. And at that point, London will be 3-0 theoretically, so they should be comfortable. But yeah, that's my one. I'm keeping my eye on Saturday. There's a good series on Saturday, actually.
Yeah, I think that's a great series. Battle of the Titans. But then Gizmo's coming back, so who knows how that works? If they're worse with Gizmo, who knows what happens? It could be interesting. They're obviously not going to bring PaulEhx in because he's obviously now in New York. So that storyline's gone. The other match, yeah. So I think there's 3 matches that I'm really looking forward to. I've got OpTic versus Seattle because Seattle are coming off that big win. Can they carry that hype and beat OpTic? That would be insane. And they'd be right back in the picture after having such a slump. Atlanta versus London, because they're 2 great teams. That will be key for seeding. And also, I love me some London in my life. Love those guys. And then New York and Paris, because Wooden Spoon. 2 new teams almost with 2 new players. Could be really interesting and a really close series. But it would be insane to see one of those teams make a huge leap forward. And it will be a real test for New York, because if they still can't win a hard point against Paris, what do you do from there? Do you just blow up the team entirely?
Yeah, it's just, we just chalk it up. Fantastic work. I mean, look, it's already chalked, so it can't go much worse, right? You would think.
Yeah.
I agree. That's a spicy series. I love that one. What about, is there any good games on Sunday? I mean, there's some very important games for as far as our seeding is concerned. I like the Minnesota Thieves game. I think FaZe Toronto is also, I don't really choose 2 FaZe series in a week, but both of those are a challenge. Like, I feel like if FaZe want to get through those series, they're going to have to do so in game 5, and it's really going to prove like their mettle, right? It's going to test their mettle. But the Minnesota Thieves series, to me, is the decider as to whether Thieves make it out into winners or not. Because if they win that, they'll have confidence. They're playing LAG in Seattle. They should get one of those wins. They might do enough. But this one against Minnesota is a tester, because if they haven't turned their search and destroy round by this point, Minnesota are going to expose them. I don't think Minnesota will lose 3 respawns here. So I think Thieves are going to have to win at least 1 search.
Yep. But
beautiful stuff.
Yeah, I think that concludes most of that.
Indeed, it does. Thanks all for joining us. Had a great show today. Loads of activity in the chat. It was a good time. No Austin. He'll be back in business next week if FaZe go 2-0. If they don't, then Austin will be chalked forever. He's just in the lab, just analyzing VODs. He just watches VODs. He's like 8 monitors just grinding the VODs. Yes, if Alleycat's streaming, we shall host Alleycat or raid Alleycat. I don't exactly know how it works, but thanks all for watching. Take care of yourselves. We'll see you next time. That's the end of the official show.